camera's a bit far over. How's it going, everybody? I'm just trying to get something set up. Also, look, here's a puppy. Look at that guy. He wants a treat. I give him some treat. Screen resolution looks different. Does it look better? Because I did try messing around with it a little bit to try and make things fit better. You think it looks clearer? Wow, chompy pup, jeez. Hey, take it nicely. Take it nicely, no chomp. Good boy. You think it looks clearer? I hope so. I did try and adjust the color balance a little as well, but I think it makes things look a little odd. I'm not a pro when it comes to that. Can see puppy clearly? Yes. So I wasn't sure, I don't know. Now it seems like some stuff is too dark and some stuff is too bright, so I don't know. Maybe I messed up the contrast or something like that. Yeah. Is anybody else? Nobody else is here yet. Let's see. Too many tabs open. Let's close a tab or two. Okay, I'm gonna try something. Let's see if it works. There. This. There we go. Okay. Sharkies are here. Good day. How's it all going? It's been pretty busy. As Farmo says, we had people in our house. Okay, let's see if that worked. I need to refresh this. Is that readable for everybody? It looks very small, but that's just how Twitch is. Okay. See if I can get it edited to be a little bit larger, but you almost thought it said boo. I got my friend Star working on some emotes for me. So that's the first one that I've got functioning. Oh, I am slightly warm. And yeah, sorry about the no stream on Wednesday. We had as Farmos was saying, we had someone sort of same day want to come look at our house, so we just kind of had to get it cleaned up and get out so that they could come through with our realtor. How are the Sharkies today? And how does, like Farmos was saying, I think just before you got here, how's the resolution look on the stream? I have been muddling around a little bit, so hopefully it's better now. I did something or other to try and improve it. It looks good? Alright. Actually, there's a question. So I uploaded that emote the only way I was able to, but I think you may not have access to it without being a subscriber. So it should be after, if you may need to refresh the page to even see it, because I just finished uploading it. Mr. Sharky just got home from work. Buncho Puppets. This has worked with power tools. All right. That's exciting, both of those. Puppets and power tools. Kind of feels like the name of some kind of like maker channel. So yeah, I'm not certain whether or not you'll be able to use the shiny new... Oh! Farmos unlocked it temporarily with points. Well, that's good enough. I'm sure everyone here's probably got lots of points by this point. You're in for puppets and power tools. I think it's all yours. Seems like a good channel name for the Sharkies. Puppets and power tools. Seems kind of on brand, right? Yeah, I imagine. Haven't really had anything to spend points on for this channel yet, so I imagine you've probably got plenty for temporary emote usage. So yeah, the angst one is going to get a little bit of editing done to it to hopefully make it slightly more legible. Little do I know, and then you tell me the thing. I don't know if that's a correct usage of little do you know. I think if it's, little did I know, I should continue to remain ignorant about it. It's just other people learn that I don't know about it. Now everyone here knows about it. Also, how does one train puppets? Little did. Oh, I see. It's past tense. Now I know. Yeah, so Angst is going to get a little bit of editing to hopefully make it slightly clearer. And then Hank is a work in progress, because I can show you what it currently looks like, but the letters, once it gets shrunk down, are just too small. So currently it's kind of looking like that, but it may need some editing to actually make it functional. So those are the first 2 out of 5. And then we'll see what the rest look like. Maybe by next week? Maybe. Maybe just 2 rows. Yeah, we'll see. They look lovely. Well, now we've got, options for when these things come up. So far, just for the angst, though. And we're in the Vale of Aldor. There might be a little angst. We did just leave off with Garion getting dug up out of the ground by his friends. That's a good reason to be a little angsty. I love that last chapter we read. It's just so goofy compared to the rest of what's been happening more recently. No life or death struggles, just having a nice time in the Vale and then accidentally getting buried up to your armpits. In fairly densely packed ground, so it's tough to get out. You can see the shadow of my camera here. Why does that look extra strange for some reason? The sun is just like right over here, obviously. You're always up for an absurd interlude. It's another good channel name. Although it's a little tricky to say, absurd interlude. It's not it's not a complete tongue twister, but it doesn't roll very well. It looks good. It sounds weird. Yeah. So, that's what the most recent chapter was. We read 2 on Friday, a week ago today. The previous one was Garion, I think, getting shown around his great etc. grandfather's tower, and them having a little talk about a variety of things. You can see the shadow of my camera here, and then the reflection of it over here, and the reflection of the outdoors over here. Should I close the blinds? Would it be better for people if I close the blinds, do you think? It looks like a small... Nice. I would watch that. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily want to be the victim, but film noir robot murder mystery. Johnny 5 dead. No disassemble. Yeah. It's weird going back to those movies and being like, oh, this is actually kind of racist. They got a guy in brownface. They've got a non-Indian actor playing an Indian character and really playing up stereotypes. Forget if that was in both 1 and 2 or just in 2. You're watching an episode of Clone Wars. Many of the broken droids were saying, reassemble me. Nice. Farmos and I are somewhat of the way through Clone Wars. We're a few seasons in. But we haven't watched it for a little while. Yeah. So, we're currently on chapter 12, page 131. Ooh, the camera shadow kind of throws off the dramatic lighting. By the last season, there are episodes you would argue are some of the best Star Wars in the entire canon. Well, have you watched Mandalorian? Because that's kind of how I feel about Mandalorian. Some of the Mandalorian stuff is real good. Real good. Obi-Wan was pretty good. It actually, no, Obi-Wan had some excellent moments in it. I don't want to undersell it. Obi-Wan was actually very good. But it was only 6 episodes, so kids have only seen the first episode of The Mandalorian. Yeah, I definitely thoroughly enjoyed that show. And it was a show that I feel like got stronger as it went on, which is nice. Like, I didn't feel like everything was, like, all the good stuff was only in the first season or anything, which is frequently the case. You know, they run out of ideas or whatever. I felt like the second season was also really good. Kids only saw the first season. Obi-Wan was pretty good, but you were less invested because there were no real stakes. It is one of those weird stories where, you know, kind of like just like the prequel movies, where you know these characters already, you know where they're going to wind up, you know the ending. So, but that said, I didn't feel like there were no real stakes, and it did have some great fights, some very dramatic moments. I was wondering what I was seeing out the back window, but it's just traffic going by. Now, Ms. Marvel is all wrapped up. I quite enjoyed that. That was really good. Apparently, it is the MCU's currently, like, highest ever rated project on Rotten Tomatoes, which is surprising to me. Um, Not because I didn't think it was good, but just because I've seen a lot of people complaining about Ms. Marvel, but I don't know. Not usually for any really valid sounding reasons. Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, he did. It really did seem to bridge the character well. And there was a lot of, you know, he said the thing, he did the thing. A lot of that. Yeah. So why don't we read some book, huh? Giving people a little bit of time if anyone else was going to show up. Mrs. has read the first 3 comics of Ms. Marvel. I wonder whether that is going to be good or not. Because there's definitely changes. Like, she does not have the same powers from the comics. Hopefully that's not a spoiler. It's, you know, a first episode sort of thing. Um, so there's definitely, like, some changes to a variety of things about the character. But it's definitely, like, it's a different genre, I think, than any other Marvel MCU um, project so far, film or show. Because most MCU stuff is pretty, you know what to expect. It's going to be like action adventure type stuff, right? Superhero blasting and battling and whatever. And there's some subgenres in there. You know, Black Widow has, like, the actual Black Widow movie had some sort of kind of spy elements in it. Same with like Hawkeye a little bit, and like Doctor Strange 2 was a little bit, you know, more sort of scary. But this one felt very much like a different genre. Like it's like something you would expect to see on the Disney Channel, aimed towards a younger audience. So a bit more lighthearted most of the time, not all the way through, but frequently more lighthearted and like a little more, yeah, for a like teenage audience, I suppose. But as long as you've got those expectations in mind. Oh boy, this is getting bright in here, isn't it? I'm gonna close the blinds. Hopefully that'll help a little. Less glare. A little bit. There's still. Do I need to close something else? It's the light coming in over there as well. It's weird. Maybe I need to. Maybe that'll. No. No, it's not that. There we go. That was the one. I found it. It was really like right on my teeth. That's funny. Oh, and now I'm out of focus. Oh well. When is the 1 year anniversary? That is a good question. Did we miss it? It's possible. I wonder if I can figure that out without too much time. Go to my this. I think it's coming up. I think it is soon. Because it looks like I set up maybe the email account for this on the 27th of July last year. Yeah, and I got a YouTube subscriber notification on the 29th. So it was somewhere in the 20s of July last year. I think probably around the 27th. Somewhere in that range was when I was setting things up anyways. Next Wednesday. Let's see if I... can find my first upload. Yeah, I uploaded The Hobbit Chapter 1 on July 28th, and it says recorded July 28th. So I think the actual first stream where we read something was on the 28th a year ago. Which was a Wednesday. So it has actually been 6 days from now. So yeah, maybe we should do something. I don't know if I have any ideas for that. So if anyone's got any suggestions, but yeah. That's a good point. You remembered it was summer? Yeah. No, that lines up. Face reveal. 1 year, huh? We've been doing this for a year. It's kind of weird, isn't it? A year of reading books. Almost twice a week. A few exceptions. Especially recently, there's been more exceptions than before, but there's just been so much going on. Other than that, it was basically only on a couple of holidays that we missed them. Pretty weird. All right, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna celebrate right now by reading chapter 12. Yeah, we started out with 3 times a week, but I think it wasn't too long that we shortened it to 2. I don't even know if we finished The Hobbit to cut down to 2 a week. But that's true. With the 3 a week, maybe we averaged on more. Maybe we averaged more than twice a week. Maybe. All right. I'm going to read this now. Chapter 12, page 131. Why did you try to lift it? Belgarath asked Garion the next morning, after he and Aunt Pole had returned, and Silk and Hetar had solemnly informed them of the predicament in which they had found the young man the afternoon before. There's emphasis on the word lift. Why did you try to lift it? It seemed like the best way to tip it over, Garion answered. You know, kind of get hold of it from underneath and then roll it, sort of. Why didn't you just push against it, close to the top? It would have rolled over if you'd done it that way. I didn't think of it. Don't you realize that soft earth won't accept that kind of pressure? Aunt Pole asked. I do now, Garion replied. But wouldn't pushing on it have just moved me backward? You have to brace yourself, Belgarath explained. That's part of the whole trick. As much of your will goes to holding yourself immobile as it does to pushing against the object you're trying to move. Otherwise, all you do is just shove yourself away. I didn't know that, Garion admitted. It's the first time I've ever tried to do anything unless it was an emergency. Will you stop that? He demanded crossly of Senedra, who had collapsed into gales of laughter as soon as Silk had finished telling them about Garion's blunder. She laughed even harder. I think you're going to have to explain a few things to him, Father, Aunt Pole said. He doesn't seem to have even the most rudimentary idea about the way forces react against each other. She looked at Garion critically. It's lucky you didn't decide to throw it, she told him. You might have flung yourself halfway back to Maragor. I really don't think it's all that funny, Garion told his friends, who were all grinning openly at him. This isn't as easy as it looks, you know. He realized that he had just made a fool of himself. Really? He just now realized that? And he was not sure if he were more embarrassed or hurt by their amusement. Come with me, boy, Belgarath said firmly. It looks as if we're going to have to start at the very beginning. Well, yeah, I would think so. That's kind of where we're at. It's not my fault I didn't know, Garion protested. You should have told me. I didn't know. A very good place to start. Yeah.
I didn't know you were planning to start experimenting so soon, the old man replied. Most of us have sense enough to wait for guidance before we start rearranging local geography.
Well, that's not the way he told his encounter. Well, at least I did manage to move it, Garion said defensively, as he followed the old man across the meadow toward the tower.
Splendid. Did you put it back the way you found it?
Why? What difference does it make?
We don't move things here in the Vale. Everything that's here is here for a reason, and they are all supposed to be exactly where they are.
I didn't know, Garion apologized. He's saying that a lot.
You do now. Let's go put it back where it belongs.
Grandfather, Garion said finally,
Yes?
when I moved the rock, it seemed that I was getting the strength to do it from all around me. It just seemed to flow in from every place. Does that mean anything?
That's the way it works,
Belgarath explained.
When we do something, we take the power to do it from our surroundings. When you burned Chamdar, for example, you drew the heat from all around you, from the air, from the ground, and from everyone who was in the area. You drew a little heat from everything to build the fire. When you tipped the rock over, you took the force to do it from everything nearby.
I thought it all came from inside.
Only when you create things, the old man replied. That force has to come from within us. For anything else, we borrow. We gather up a little power from here and there and put it all together, and then turn it loose all at one spot. Nobody's big enough to carry around the kind of force it would take to do even the simplest sort of thing.
Then that's what happens when somebody tries to unmake something, Garion said intuitively. He pulls in all the force, but then he can't let it go, and it just... He spread his hands and jerked them suddenly apart. Belgarath looked narrowly at him.
You've got a strange sort of mind, boy. You understand the difficult things quite easily, but you can't seem to get hold of the simple ones. There's the rock.
He shook his head.
That will never do. Put it back where it belongs and try not to make so much noise this time. That racket you raised yesterday echoed all over the Vale.
What do I do? Thank you, Garion asked.
Gather in the force,
Belgarath told him.
Take it from everything around.
Garion tried that.
Not from me,
the old man exclaimed sharply. Garion excluded his grandfather from his field of reaching out and pulling in. After a moment or two, he felt as if he were tingling all over, and that his hair was standing on end.
Now what?
He asked, clenching his teeth to hold it in.
Push out behind you and push at the rock at the same time.
What do I push at behind me?
Everything. And at the rock as well. It has to be simultaneous.
Won't I get sort of squeezed in between?
Tense yourself up.
We'd better hurry, Grandfather, Garion said. I feel like I'm going to fly apart.
Hold it in. Now, put your will on the rock and say the word.
Garion put his hands out in front of him and straightened his arms. "Push!" he commanded. He felt the surge and the roaring. With a resounding thud, the rock teetered and then rolled back smoothly to where it had been the morning before. Garion suddenly felt bruised all over, and he sank to his knees in exhaustion.
"Push?"
Belgarath said incredulously. "You said to say push."
"I said to push. I didn't say to say push."
"It went over. What difference does it make what word I used?"
"It's a question of style,"
the old man said with a pained look.
"Push sounds so babyish."
Weakly, Garion began to laugh. Yeah, it can be difficult to explain things that you do off of muscle memory when you, especially something that requires tools, when you don't have your hands on said tools. That's definitely true. If you can't do it while explaining it, it can be tricky.
"After all, Garion, we do have a certain dignity to maintain,"
the old man said loftily.
"If we go around saying push or flop or things like that, no one's ever going to take us seriously."
Garion wanted to stop laughing, but he simply couldn't. Belgarath stalked away indignantly, muttering to himself. When they returned to the others, they found that the tents had been struck and the pack horses loaded. "There's no point in staying here," Aunt Pole told them, "and the others are waiting for us. Did you manage to make him understand anything, Father?" Belgarath grunted, his face set in an expression of profound disapproval. "Things didn't go well, I take it?"
"I'll explain later,"
he said shortly. During Garion's absence, Sinedra, with much coaxing and a lapful of apples from their stores, had seduced the little colt into a kind of ecstatic subservience. He followed her about shamelessly, and the rather distant look he gave Garion showed not the slightest trace of guilt. "You're going to make him sick," Garion accused her. "Apples are good for horses," she replied airily. "Tell her, Hetar," Garion said. "They won't hurt him," the hook-nosed man answered. "It's a customary way to gain the trust of a young horse." Betrayed. Garion tried to think of another suitable objection, but without success. For some reason, the sight of the little animal nuzzling at Sinedra offended him, though he couldn't exactly put his finger on why. "Who are these others, Belgarath?" Silk asked as they rode. "The ones Polgara mentioned."
"My brothers," the
old sorcerer replied.
"Our masters advised them that we're coming." I've heard stories about the Brotherhood of Sorcerers all my life. Are they as remarkable as everyone says? I think you're in for a bit of a disappointment, Aunt Pole told him rather primly. For the most part, sorcerers tend to be crotchety old men with a wide assortment of bad habits. I grew up amongst them, so I know them all rather well. She turned her face to the thrush perched on her shoulder, singing adoringly. Yes, she said to the bird, I know. Garion pulled closer to his aunt and began to listen very hard to the bird song. At first it was merely noise, pretty but without sense. Then, gradually, he began to pick up scraps of meaning, a bit here, a bit there. The bird was singing of nests and small speckled eggs, and sunrises, and the overwhelming joy of flying. Then, as if his ears had suddenly opened, Garion began to understand. Larks sang of flying and singing. Sparrows chirped of hidden little pockets of seeds. A hawk, soaring overhead, screamed its lonely song of riding the wind alone and the fierce joy of the kill. Garion was awed as the air around him suddenly came alive with words. Aunt Pole looked at him gravely. It's a beginning, she said, without bothering to explain. Garion was so caught up in the world that had just opened to him that he did not see the two silvery-haired men at first. They stood together beneath a tall tree, waiting as the party rode nearer. They wore identical blue robes, and their white hair was quite long, though they were clean-shaven. When Garion looked at them for the first time, he thought for a moment that his eyes were playing tricks. The two were so absolutely identical that it was impossible to tell them apart. Belgarath, our brother, one of them said. It's been such a terribly long time, the other finished. Beltira,
Belgarath said.
Belkira.
He dismounted and embraced the twins. Dearest little Polgara, one of them said, and then, the veil has been, the other started, empty without you, the second completed. He turned to his brother. That was very poetic, he said admiringly. Thank you, the first replied modestly.
These are my brothers, Beltira and Belkira,
Belgarath informed the members of the party who had begun to dismount.
Don't bother to try to keep them separate. Nobody can tell them apart anyway.
We can, the two said in unison.
I'm not even sure of that,
Belgarath responded with a gentle smile.
Your minds are so close together that your thoughts start with one and finish with the other.
You always complicate it so much, Father, Aunt Pole said. This is Beltira. She kissed one of the sweet-faced old men. And this is Belkira. She kissed the other. I've been able to tell them apart since I was a child. Polgara knows all our secrets. The twins smiled. And who are your companions?
I think you'll recognize them,
Belgarath answered.
Mandoralin, Baron of Vomandor.
The Knight Protector, the twins said in unison, bowing.
Prince Keldar of Drasnia.
The Guide, they said.
Barak, Earl of Trelheim.
The Dreadful Bear, They looked at the big Cherik apprehensively. Barak's face darkened, but he said nothing. Poor Barak.
Hetar, son of Chohag of Algaria.
The Horse Lord.
And Dernik of Sendaria.
The one with 2 lives, they murmured with profound respect. Dernik looked baffled at that.
Senedra, Imperial Princess of Tolnedra.
The Queen of the World, they replied with another deep bow. Senedra laughed nervously. And this can only be Belgarian, they said, their faces alive with joy. The Chosen One. The twins reached out in unison and laid their right hands on Garion's head. Their voices sounded within his mind. Hail Belgarian, Overlord and Champion, Hope of the World. Garion was too surprised at this strange benediction to do more than awkwardly nod his head.
If this gets any more cloying, I think I'll vomit.
A new voice, harsh and rasping, announced. The speaker, who had just stepped out from behind the tree, was a squat, misshapen old man, dirty and profoundly ugly. His legs were bowed and gnarled like oak trunks. Bowed or bowed? I think bowed. His shoulders were huge, and his hands dangled below his knees. Excuse me. There was a large hump in the middle of his back, and his face was twisted into a grotesque caricature of a human countenance. His straggly, iron-gray hair and beard were matted, and twigs and bits of leaves were caught in the tangles. His hideous face wore an expression of perpetual contempt and anger.
Beldin,
Belgarath said mildly.
We weren't sure you would come. I shouldn't have, you bungler,
the ugly man snapped.
You've made a mess of things as usual, Belgarath.
He turned to the twins.
Get me something to eat,
he told them peremptorily. Maybe a little more angry than the librarian. Yes, Beldin, they said quickly and started away.
And don't be all day,
he shouted after them.
You seem to be in a good humor today, Beldin,
Belgarath said with no trace of sarcasm.
What's made you so cheerful?
The ugly dwarf scowled at him, then laughed, a short, barking sound.
I saw Belzadar. He looked like an unmade bed. Something had gone terribly wrong for him, and I enjoy that sort of thing.
Dear Uncle Beldin, Aunt Pole said fondly, putting her arms around the filthy little man. I've missed you so much.
Don't try to charm me, Polgara, he told her,
though his eyes seemed to soften slightly.
This is as much your fault as it is your father's. I thought you were going to keep an eye on him. How did Belzadar get his hands on our master's orb? We think he used a child, Belgarath answered seriously. The orb won't strike an innocent.
The dwarf snorted.
There's no such thing as an innocent. All men are born corrupt.
He turned his eyes back to Aunt Pole and looked appraisingly at her.
You're getting fat,
he said bluntly.
Your hips are as wide as an ox cart.
Dernik immediately clenched his fists and went for the hideous little man. The dwarf laughed, and one of his big hands caught
front of the smith's tunic. Without any seeming effort, he lifted the surprised Dernick and threw him several yards away. "You can start your second life right now if you want," he growled threateningly. "Let me handle this, Dernick," Aunt Pole told the smith. "Belden," she said coolly, "how long has it been since you've had a bath?" The dwarf shrugged. "It rained on me a couple months ago." "Not hard enough, though. You smell like an uncleaned pigsty." Belden grinned at her. "That's my girl," he chortled. "I was afraid the years had taken off your edge." The two of them then began to trade the most hair-raising insults Geryon had ever heard in his life. Graphic, ugly words passed back and forth between them, almost sizzling in the air. Barak's eyes widened in astonishment, and Mandaralen's face blanched often. Sinedra, her face flaming, bolted out of earshot. The worse the insults, however, the more the hideous Belden smiled. Finally, Aunt Pole delivered an epithet so vile that Geryon actually cringed, and the ugly little man collapsed on the ground, roaring with laughter and hammering at the dirt with his great fists. "By the gods, I've missed you, Pole," he gasped. "Come here and give us a kiss." She smiled, kissing his dirty face affectionately. "Mangy dog." "Big cow." He grinned, catching her in a crushing embrace. "I'll need my ribs more or less in one piece, Uncle," she told him. Sharkies wish some of their insults had actually been written. It's a tricky thing. I don't know. That's something I wonder about. It's something like when you play a character in D&D that's got an exceptionally high intelligence or charisma score or something like that, where you're like, according to these numbers, my character is smarter than I probably am. How do I play that character? I feel like this is something similar where it's like, the author could have written down some of those insults, but I don't know. Maybe it's something that's just better left to your imagination. And also, I guess it's a matter of how far is he willing to really commit things to the page. "I haven't cracked any of your ribs in years, my girl." Author doesn't feel worthy of the insults of the demigods. "I'd like to keep it that way." The twins hurried across to the dwarf Belden, carrying a large plate of steaming stew and a huge tankard. The ugly man looked curiously at the plate, then casually dumped the stew on the ground and tossed the plate away. "Doesn't smell too bad." He squatted and began to stuff the food into his mouth with both hands, pausing only now and then to spit out some of the larger pebbles that clung to the chunks of meat. When he had finished, he swilled down the contents of the tankard, belched thunderously, and sat back, scratching at his matted hair with gravy-smeared fingers. Stew. Not like a steak or something like that. He dumped stew on into the dirt and then ate it. That's... Yeesh. Yeah, I want to set up our new table too. It's so frustrating that it's just sitting boxed up in the garage. "Let's get down to business," he said. Can't read that sentence. That sentence has just been corrupted. I don't know if corrupted is right, but Where have you been?
Belgarath asked him. Yet there it is. Deet, deet, deet. Yep.
Where have you been?
Belgarath asked him.
Central Cthul Murgos. I've been sitting on a hilltop since the Battle of Vomimbre, watching the cave where Belzadar took Torak.
500 years? Silk gasped. Belden shrugged.
More or less,
He replied indifferently.
somebody had to keep an eye on Burnt Face, and I wasn't doing anything that couldn't be interrupted.
You said you saw Belzadar? Aunt Pole said. Yeah, the juxtaposition of Aunt Pole and Belden is definitely interesting, especially with how well they seem to get on with each other and how she stoops to his level for those interactions. Or at least how that seems to be like their tradition. You said you saw Belzadar, Aunt Pole said.
About a month ago, he came to the cave as if he had a demon on his tail and pulled Torak out. Then he changed himself into a vulture and flew off with the body. That must have been right after Ktuchik caught him at the Nissen border and took the orb away from him.
Belgarath mused.
I wouldn't know about that. That was part of your responsibility, not mine. All I was supposed to do was keep watch over Torak. Did any of the ashes fall on you?
Which ashes? One of the twins asked.
When Belzadar took Torak out of the cave, the mountain exploded, blew its guts out. I imagine it had something to do with the force surrounding One Eye's body. It was still blowing when I left.
We wondered what had caused the eruption, Aunt Pole commented. It put ash down an inch deep all over Nyissa.
Good. Too bad it wasn't deeper.
Did you see any signs of Torak stirring? The twins asked.
Can't you two ever talk straight?
Belden demanded. We're sorry. It's our nature. The ugly little man shook his head with disgust. I'm hoping that people can tell when I'm switching from one line to the other, because they're very frequently broken up. Kind of right here, you can see there. Did you see any signs of Torak stirring? Because they're splitting up their sentences. So I'm trying to slightly differentiate their voices, but not too much.
Never mind. No. Torak didn't move once in the whole 500 years. There was mold on him when Belzadar dragged him out of the cave. Did you follow Belzadar?
Belgarath asked.
Naturally. Where did he take Torak? Now where do you think, idiot? To the ruins of Thol Mishrak and Meloria, of course. There are only a few places on Earth that will bear Torak's weight, and that's one of them. Belzadar will have to keep Ktuchik and the orb away from Torak, and that's the only place he could go. The Melorian Grolems refuse to accept Ktuchik's authority, so Belzadar will be safe there. It will cost him a great deal to pay for their aid, but they'll keep Ktuchik out of Meloria, unless he raises an army of Murgos and invades. That's something we could hope for,
Barak said.
You're supposed to be a bear, not a donkey,
Belden told him.
Don't base your hopes on the impossible. Neither Ktuchik nor Belzadar would start that sort of war at this particular time. Not with Belgarian here stalking through the world like an earthquake.
He scowled at Aunt Pole.
Can't you teach him to be a little quieter? Or are your wits getting as flabby as your behind?
Be civil, Uncle, she replied. The boy's just coming into his strength. We were all a bit clumsy at first.
He doesn't have time to be a baby, Pole. The stars are dropping into southern Cthul Murgos like poisoned roaches, and dead Grolims are moaning in their tombs from Rak Cthul to Rak Haga. The time's on us, and he has to be ready.
He'll be ready, Uncle.
Maybe,
the filthy man said sourly. Switching between those three in particular is, I'm like, ugh, am I even making them sound different at all? We've had all three of them say something in this conversation.
Are you going back to Cthul Mishrak?
Belgarath asked. Eddings really likes to remind us how filthy and ugly Belden is. Yes. Yes, he does.
No. Our master told me to stay here. The twins and I have work to do, and we don't have much time.
He spoke to us, too.
Stop that!
Belden snapped. He turned back to Belgarath.
Are you going to Rak Cthul now? Not yet. We've got to go to Prolgu first. I have to talk to the Gorim, and we've got to pick up another member of the party. I noticed that your group wasn't complete yet. What about the last one?
Belgarath spread his hands.
That's the one that worries me. I haven't been able to find any trace of her, and I've been looking for 3,000 years. You spent too much time looking in alehouses.
I noticed the same thing, Uncle, Aunt Pole said with a sweet little smile.
Where do we go after Prolgu?
Barak asked.
I think that then we'll go to Rak Cthul,
Belgarath replied, rather grimly.
We've got to get the orb back from Ktuchik, and I've been meaning to have a rather pointed discussion with the magician of the Murgos for a long, long time now.
We have finished part 2. The Vale of Aldur. Next up, Ulgo. You can see the map through the page. Oh, this map is upwards. Ulgoland. Not an amusement park. North of Tolnidra. East of Arendia, and west of Angrak, right in the middle. You can see Prolgu on the map there. And what do we got here? Main gallery, maybe? Is that what that says? Yeah, main galleries. Then we've got Grull's Valley and Relg's Passageway. Of course, I've gone out of focus here. It was focused up rather nicely there. Oh well. Your map is in landscape view, really? This, I think, is one of the first that hasn't been. Was the Vale of Aldur? Yeah, the Vale of Aldur was this a ways. I think this is the first one that hasn't been, other than like the main, the primary map. So Ulgoland is actually west of them right now. It looks like. So this will actually be one of the first times I think that they will be traveling west. It's almost all been like south, then east, and then north. I guess they did. No, yeah. This is going to be one of the few times they're traveling west. I wonder if they get to meet Walt Ulgo. Oh boy. I said it's not an amusement park. And the second, oh, yours is still Chris or whatever. Chris Barbieri. Feels like a weirdly circuitous route. Well, it has, their destination keeps changing. They keep going one way than another because they've been chasing Zedar, and then had the detour at Summistra's palace, but they were still chasing Zedar at that point. And then they got summoned to the Vale, so they've just had different destinations all over the place. But yeah, they've kind of done a spiral. Yeah. So it is 10 after 8. Let's see how far chapter 13, how long it is. Chapter 13 is not that long. It's 9 pages. What do we think? Everybody awake enough for that? I just wanted to. Not that there was any angst here. All right. Page 145. Chapter 13. The following morning, they turned northwest and rode toward the stark, white peaks of the mountains of Ulgo, glittering in the morning sun above the lush meadows of the Vale.
"Snow up there,"
Barak observed.
"It could be a difficult trip."
It always is, Hatar told him. Have you been to Prolgu before? Dernick asked. A few times. We keep communications open with the Ulgos. Our visits are mostly ceremonial. Princess Senedra had been riding beside Aunt Pole, her tiny face troubled. How can you stand him, Lady Polgara? She burst out finally. He's so ugly. Who's that, dear? That awful dwarf. Uncle Belden? Aunt Pole looked mildly surprised. He's always been like that. You have to get to know him, that's all. But he says such terrible things to you. It's the way he hides his real feelings, Aunt Pole explained. He's a very gentle person, really, but people don't expect that, coming from him. When he was a child, his people drove him out because he was so deformed and hideous. When he finally came to the Vale, our master saw past the ugliness to the beauty in his mind. But does he have to be so dirty? Aunt Pole shrugged slightly. He hates his deformed body, so he ignores it. She looked at the princess, her eyes calm. It's the easiest thing in the world to judge things by appearances, Senedra, she said, and it's usually wrong. Uncle Belden and I are very fond of each other. That's why we take the trouble to invent such elaborate insults. Compliments would be hypocrisy. He is, after all, very ugly. I just don't understand. Senedra sounded baffled. Love can show itself in many strange ways, Aunt Pole told her. Her tone was offhand, but the look she directed at the tiny princess was penetrating. Sinedra flickered one quick look at Garion, then averted her eyes, blushing slightly. Amon Breyer. Hey, welcome. How am I today? I'm doing very well. I'm Sleet. It's nice to see someone new here. We're kind of almost in the middle of Magician's Gambit by David Eddings. Read a lot of fantasy books mostly, but we've read, this is the third book, as it says on the cover there, from this series, and we've also read some Sir Terry Pratchett and The Hobbit. This is the first book we read on this channel. We're actually just discussing today, in a week, well, next Wednesday, this will be the 1-year anniversary for my channel here. Have you read the series before? Are you familiar with it? Let's see. Garion considered the exchange between his Aunt Pole and the princess as he rode. I'm sorry about that. Well, I don't know, would it help if I face the camera more so you can see my lips easier, or can I speak louder? Anything like that? Anything I can do to assist? Got a lot of facial hair right now, so I don't know if that makes things more difficult. That's something I haven't checked. I upload all my previous streams onto YouTube, and I know YouTube has auto captioning, but I have not checked whether it actually does that for my videos or not. Yeah, it's good to have you here, and you're welcome. I don't know. I mean, I could try setting. No, it's really not going to be visible, the text. Just trying to think of what I could do to make things easier. Well, for now, I'll try adjusting the way I'm sitting, and hopefully that'll help a little bit. And I can't turn the gain up on my microphone anymore, but I'm going to continue here. Maybe your kids are loud. Are you reading anything right now? Let's see. Garion considered the exchange between his Aunt Pole and the princess as he rode. It was quite obvious that Aunt Pole had been telling the little girl something important, but whatever it was escaped him. Garion as dense as always. They rode for several days across the vale, and then moved up into the foothills which clustered along the flanks of the ragged peaks that formed the land of the Ulgos. Sharkies are listening to a battle as well. It's too bad we don't have a battle scene going on here. Once again, the seasons changed as they rode. It was early autumn as they crested the first low range, and the valleys beyond were aflame with crimson leaves. Skyrim of the living room is happening. At the top of a second, higher range, the trees had been swept bare, and the wind had the first bite of winter in it as it whistled down from the peaks. The sky grew overcast, and tendrils of cloud seeped down the rocky gorges above them. Spits of intermittent snow and rain pelted them as they climbed higher up the rocky slopes. "I suppose we'd better begin keeping an eye out for Brill," Silk said, hopefully, one snowy afternoon. "It's about time for him to show up again."
"Not very likely,"
Belgarath replied.
"Murgos avoid Ulgoland even more than they avoid the Vale. Ulgos dislike Angarax intensely."
"So do Alorns."
Ulgos can see in the dark, though, the old man told him. Murgos who come into these mountains tend not to wake up from their first night's sleep up here. I don't think we need to worry about Brill.
Pity, Silk remarked with a certain disappointment.
It won't hurt to keep our eyes open, though. There are worse things than Murgos in the mountains of Ulgo.
Silk scoffed. Aren't those stories exaggerated?
No, not really.
The region abounds with monsters, Prince Keldar, Mandaralin assured the little man. Some years back, a dozen foolish young knights of my acquaintance rode into these mountains to test their bravery and prowess against the unseemly beasts. Not one returned. When they crested the next ridge, the full force of a winter gale struck them. Snow, which had grown steadily heavier as they climbed, drove horizontally in the howling wind.
We'll have to take cover until this blows over, Belgarath,
Barak shouted above the wind, fighting to keep his flapping bearskin cape around him. Draft, maybe. Can you tell a hawk from a handsaw?
Let's drop down into this next valley,
Belgarath replied, also struggling with his cloak.
The trees down there should break the wind.
Maybe the monsters in Ilgoland are very nice, and Mandaralin's friends didn't come back because they're snuggling with some unicorns. That's how they get you. That horn isn't for nothing, you know. They crossed the ridge and angled down toward the pines, clustered at the bottom of the basin ahead. Garion pulled his cloak tighter and bowed his head into the shrieking wind. The thick stand of sapling pine in the basin blocked the force of the gale, but the snow swirled about them as they reined in.
We're not going to get much farther today, Belgarath,
Barak declared, trying to brush the snow out of his beard.
We might as well hole up here and wait for morning.
What's that? Dernick asked sharply, cocking his head to one side.
The wind,
Barak shrugged. No, listen. Above the howling of the wind, a shrill, whinnying sound came to them. Look there, Petar pointed. Dimly, they saw a dozen horse-like animals crossing the ridge behind them. Their shapes were blurred by the thickly falling snow, and their line as they moved seemed almost ghostly. On a rise just above them stood a huge stallion, his mane and tail tossing in the wind. His neigh was almost a shrill scream.
Hrulgan,
Belgarath said sharply. Can we outrun them? Silk asked hopefully.
I doubt it,
Belgarath replied.
Besides, they've got our scent now. They'll dog our trail from here to Prolgu if we try to run.
Carnivorses. Nice. Then we must teach them to fear our trail and avoid it, Mandaralin declared, tightening the straps on his shield. His eyes were very bright.
You're falling back into your old habits, Mandaralin,
Barak observed in a grumpy voice. Hetar's face had assumed that curiously blank expression it usually did when he was communicating with his horses. He shuddered finally, and his eyes went sick with revulsion. Well? Aunt Pole asked him. They aren't horses, he began. We know that, Hetar, she replied. Can you do anything with them? Frighten them off, perhaps? He shook his head. They're hungry, Polgara, he told her, and they have our scent. The herd stallion seems to have much more control over them than he would if they were horses. I might be able to frighten one or two of the weaker ones, if it weren't for him.
Then we'll have to fight them all,
Barak said grimly, buckling on his shield. I don't think so, Hetar replied, his eyes narrowing. The key seems to be the stallion. He dominates the whole herd. I think that if we kill him, the rest will turn and run.
All right,
Barak said.
We try for the stallion, then.
Barak suggests violence. We might want to make some kind of noise, Hetar suggested. Something that sounds like a challenge. That might make him come out to the front to answer it. Otherwise, we'll have to go through the whole herd to get to him. Mayhap this will provoke him, Mandaralan said. He lifted his horn to his lips and blew a brassy note of ringing defiance that was whipped away by the gale. The stallion's shrill scream answered immediately.
It sounds as if it's working,
Barak observed.
Blow it again, Mandaralan.
Play it again. Mandaralan sounded his horn again, and again the stallion shrilled his reply. Ugh, of course you spelled it H-A-Y. Then the great beast plunged down from the ridgetop and charged furiously through the herd toward them. When he reached the forefront, he shrieked again and reared up on his hind legs, his front claws flashing in the snowy air.
That did it,
Barak barked.
Let's go!
He jammed his spurs home, and his big gray leaped forward, spraying snow behind him. Hetar and Mandaralan swept out to flank him, and the three plunged forward through the thickly falling snow toward the screaming Hrulga stallion. Mandaralan set his lance as he charged, and a strange sound drifted back on the wind as he thundered toward the advancing Hrulgan. Mandaralan was laughing. Garion drew his sword and pulled his horse in front of Aunt Pole and Senedra. He realized that it was probably a futile gesture, but he did it anyway. Two of the Hrulgan, perhaps at the herd stallion's unspoken command, bounded forward to cut off Barak and Mandaralan, while the stallion himself moved to meet Hetar as if recognizing the Algar as the greatest potential danger to the herd. As the first Hrulga reared, his fangs bared in a cat-like snarl and his clawed feet widespread, Mandaralan lowered his lance and drove it through the snarling monster's chest. Bloody froth burst from the Hrulga's mouth, and he toppled over backward, clutching at the broken shaft of Mandaralan's lance into splinters as he fell. Barak caught a clawed swipe on his shield and split open the head of the second Hrulga with a vast overhand swing of his heavy sword. The beast collapsed, his convulsions churning the snow. Hetar and the herd stallion stalked each other in the swirling snow. They moved warily, circling, their eyes locked on each other with deadly intensity. Suddenly, the stallion reared and lunged all in one motion, his great forelegs wide and his claws outspread. But Hetar's horse, his mind linked with his rider's, danced clear of the furious charge. Yeah, we get the occasional bout of violence in these books. This, I think, is only the second fight with monsters that we've had so far. Usually it's against other people, but there was the one with the Algroths a book ago, pretty early on. Oh, no, this is the third, because there was also the Zombuggies. Yep, as Farmos is saying. This is the third monster fight. Zombuggies. The Hrulga spun and charged again, and once again Hetar's horse jumped to one side. The infuriated stallion screamed his frustration and lunged in, his claws flailing. Hetar's horse sidestepped the enraged beast, then darted in, and Hetar launched himself from his saddle and landed on the stallion's back. His long, powerful legs locked about the Hrulga's ribs, and his right hand gathered a great fistful of the animal's mane. The stallion went mad as he felt, for the first time in the entire history of his species, the weight of a rider on his back. That doesn't seem right. Shouldn't this be the second? He plunged and reared and shrieked, trying to shake Hetar off. The rest of the herd, which had been moving to the attack, faltered and stared in uncomprehending horror at the stallion's wild attempts to dislodge his rider. Mandaralin and Barak reined in, dumbfounded, as Hetar rode the raging stallion in circles through the blizzard. Then, grimly, Hetar slid his left hand down to his leg and drew a long, broad dagger from his boot. He knew horses, and he knew where to strike. The first thrust was lethal. The churned snow turned red. The stallion reared one last time, screaming and with blood pouring out of his mouth, and then he dropped back to stand on shuddering legs. Slowly his knees buckled, and he toppled to one side. Hetar jumped clear. The herd of Hrulgin turned and fled, squealing, back into the blizzard. Hetar grimly cleaned his dagger in the snow and resheathed it in his boot. That's 2 within this page, at least. Briefly, he laid one hand on the dead stallion's neck, then turned to look through the trampled snow for the saber he had discarded in his wild leap onto the stallion's back. You know, it's not something that I'd want to look up. I don't want to see a scared horse. And again, these aren't exactly horses. They do have fangs. And I don't know, I imagine that their mouths are a little different at least. When the 3 warriors returned to the shelter of the trees, Mandaralin and Barak were staring at Hetar with a look of profound respect. "It's a shame they're mad," the Algar said with a distant look on his face. "There was a moment, just a moment, when I almost got through to him, and we moved together. Then the madness came back, and I had to kill him. If they could be tamed." He broke off. Horrified vampire horse of doom! I know there's a book series about a vampire rabbit, Banicula, but I hadn't heard of a vampire horse before. He broke off and shook his head. Oh well, he shrugged regretfully. You wouldn't actually ride something like that. Dernick's voice was shocked. Ugh. They were horrified. Ugh. Boo. Probably already a Skyrim mod. I've never had an animal like that under me, Hatar said quietly. I don't think I'll ever forget what it was like. The tall man turned and walked some distance away and stood staring out into the swirling snow. They set up for the night in the shelter of the pines. The next morning, the wind had abated, although it was still snowing heavily when they set out again. The snow was already knee-deep, and the horses struggled as they climbed. They crossed yet another ridge and started down into the next valley. Silk looked dubiously around at the thick falling snow settling through the silent air. If it gets much deeper, we're going to bog down, Belgarath, he said glumly, particularly if we have to keep climbing like this.
We'll be all right now, the old man assured him. We follow a series of valleys from here. They lead right up to Hrulga, so we can avoid the peaks. Belgarath, Barak said back over his shoulder from his place in the lead. There are some fresh tracks up here. He pointed ahead at a line of footprints plowed through the new snow across their path. The old man moved ahead and stopped to examine the tracks. Algroth, he said shortly. We'd better keep our eyes open.
Because bad weather is dramatic. You're enjoying the stream, Amon Briar? I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I'm wondering, is the name Amon Briar, is that a reference to something, or is that just your name? It makes me think of a character named Briar in a different book series I've read. They rode warily down into the valley, where Mandaralin paused long enough to cut himself a fresh lance. Hey, and you followed the channel, thank you. It's interesting the way that Mandaralin just cuts lances. It's not something I had ever really thought of before reading these books, that you just go and make a new one when the other one breaks. You made that name up many years ago for a D&D character that you only just recently got to play. Alright, what kind of character? What class? We've, I think everyone in the chat right now has played D&D. Probably a fair amount. Ain't that just the way? Yeah, I definitely have. Right now I've got one character that I'm waiting to play. It's not solidified yet, but Tiefling Warlock. Ah, very nice. Tiefling or Tiefling? What do people say? My default is Tiefling, but I think I've definitely heard people say Tiefling before. Barmos' current character is a Warlock, yeah. Yeah, Warlock is a great class. I haven't actually ever played a Warlock. I haven't played much 5th edition. Played a few games, but I'm currently running a game, not playing. You say Tiefling? I think that might be I don't know if there is a correct pronunciation, but Tiefling might be it. I think it's just one of those things where I read it enough times before I said it out loud that it kind of locked in as Tiefling to me. Tiefling RT. Wow. Oh, I'm kicking the tripod in front of me here. I don't usually sit facing straight on. Fling RT. Soul spawn of Ammon the Wolf, Archdevil of the Nine Hells. Very nice, very nice. Is your character evil, or is it one of those, you know, has a pact with an evil creature while trying not to be evil himself sort of things? Have I played any evil characters? I ran an evil game, and that was a lot of fun, but I don't think I've actually played an evil character myself. I'm not sure. I can't think of one. Yeah. Hmm. I've probably played a neutral character or two, but I think most of my characters have been good in some fashion. Oh, okay. What's that? What are you asking about? Did I was talking about alignment for your tieflings, orcs, and dwarfs. I do. I've got a dwarf army, sort of, but I frequently play dwarfs in games. I've played at least one dwarf character in 5th edition D&D. Have I only ever played one? That seems unlikely, but it's possible. Technically, I did play a different one for like a session or two. It's easy to distract me with D&D talk. Do I say... Did I say orc army or... Oh, I have a dwarf army for Warhammer. It's a tabletop game if you haven't heard of it. They're all packed away right now. I'm in the middle of trying to sell my house, so most of my nerdy stuff is packed up. Though I do also have some orcs, so I've got both. And I played a half orc rogue it was multi-class rogue monk in a 5th edition game that went for quite a long time. That was sort of like an assassin character. I was trying to not do the typical orc barbarian or fighter thing, so he was a half orc assassin slash shadow monk. And that was a lot of fun. I do have some 40k orcs that I haven't done anything with. And then I've got some dwarves that are hopefully going to be for like a Warcry game. Wow, yeah.
Get them choppers.
Was I going to do an orc kill team? I was thinking about it. There was some stuff I wanted to do. For kill team, the orcs had, I don't know if they still do, but they had a rule where they can hide behind a... what are they called now? They used to be called Gretchen. Grunts? Are they called grunts? Anyways, they can hide behind them, so I wanted to make one of the minis actually holding one as a shield. I'm sorry to hear about your kitty. It's a noble cause to sell your army for. It is tough losing a pet. We had someone else in the chat here who's here frequently that recently lost a kitty. 30k points. That's a lot of orcs. Jeez, you could almost play like an Armageddon game with that. She was almost 14. I've got a puppy. Let's see if I can summon him. Benedict. Oh, there he is. Oh, you showed up quick. He must have been just at the bottom of the stairs. This has been B-I-N, Benedict. He's almost a kitty, but he's not. Hey, good puppy. He's 5 years old. That's a guess, because he's adopted. Well, of course he's adopted. He's a rescue. 5.5 maybe. Oh, you got an itch? Oh, making a scratchy face. Alright. Where was I? She was awesome. Alright. Let's see. So, they rode warily. I gotta keep him in frame here. Yeah, you. They rode warily down into the valley, where Mandaralin paused long enough to cut himself a fresh lance.
I'd be a little dubious about a weapon that keeps breaking,
Barak observed, as the knight remounted. Mandaralin shrugged, his armor creaking. There are always trees about, my lord, he replied. Oh, big stretch. Oh, I couldn't catch it. He did a big stretch. He's giving me looks as if he wants more treats. But you already had lots. Oh, do you know that word now? Do you know treats? Oh, I think you might. Oh, good lay down. Alright. Back among the pines that carpeted the valley floor, Garion heard a familiar barking. Grandfather, he warned.
I hear them,
Belgarath answered. How many, do you think? Silk asked.
Perhaps a dozen,
Belgarath answered. 8, Aunt Pole corrected firmly. If they are but 8, will they dare attack? Mandaralin asked. Those we met in Arendia seemed to seek courage in numbers.
Their lair is in this valley, I think,
the old man replied.
Any animal tries to defend its lair, they're almost certain to attack.
And away he goes. We must seek them out, then, the knight declared confidently. Better to destroy them now, on ground of our own choosing, than to be surprised in some ambush.
He's definitely backsliding,
Barak observed sourly to Hatar. 2300, 11 o'clock. Yeah, well, I do this every Wednesday and Friday, just about. I'm in the middle of trying to sell this house, so that gets interrupted occasionally now. But I start at 7 p.m. Pacific time, because I'm near Vancouver, Canada. So yeah, every Wednesday and Friday I try for 7 p.m. Pacific. And we usually go for an hour or two. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. Maybe I'll do something to try and celebrate the anniversary of the stream. We'll see. I really don't have any ideas yet, because I didn't think about it at all until today. But have a good night. Sleep well. Good to meet you.
He's definitely backsliding,
Barak observed sourly to Hatar. He's probably right this time, though, Hatar replied. You'll be here Friday for sure? Okay, we'll see you in a week.
Have you been drinking, Hetar?
Barak asked suspiciously.
Come, my lords, Manderallen said gaily. Let us rout the brutes so that we may continue our journey unmolested.
He plowed off through the snow in search of the barking Algroths. Coming, Barak? Hetar invited as he drew his saber. Barak sighed.
I guess I'd better,
he answered mournfully. Barak seems like it's like a roll of the dice as to whether he's happy to be fighting or sad. Maybe he just doesn't like fighting monsters very much. Which, you know, that's fair. He turned to Belgarath.
This shouldn't take long. I'll try to keep our bloodthirsty friends out of trouble.
Hetar laughed.
You're getting to be as bad as he is,
Barak accused as the two of them moved into a gallop in Manderallen's wake. Garion and the others sat waiting tensely in the sifting snowfall. Then the barking sounds off in the woods suddenly turned into yelps of surprise. Right? It's weird getting that from Barak. The sound of blows began to ring through the trees, and there were shrieks of pain and shouts as the three warriors called to each other. After perhaps a quarter of an hour, they came galloping back with the deep snow spraying out from their horses' hooves. 2 of them got away, Hetar reported regretfully. What a shame, Silk replied.
Manderallen,
Barak said with a pained look.
You've picked up a bad habit somewhere. Fighting's a serious business, and all this giggling and laughing of yours smacks of frivolity.
Doth it offend thee, my lord?
It's not so much that it offends me, Manderallen. It's more a distraction. It breaks my concentration.
I shall strive to moderate my laughter in future, then.
I'd appreciate it.
How did it go? Silk asked.
It wasn't much of a fight,
Barak replied.
We caught them completely by surprise. I hate to admit it, but our chortling friend there was right for once.
Garion thought about Manderallen's changed behavior as they rode on down the valley. Back at the cave where the colt had been born, Dernick had told Manderallen that fear could be conquered by laughing at it, and, though Dernick had probably not meant it in precisely that way, Manderallen had taken his words quite literally. The laughter which so irritated Barak was not directed at the foes he met, but rather at the enemy within him. Manderallen was laughing at his own fear as he rode to each attack. Oh, it didn't come out as a face on my side. Did it turn into like an emote for you? For me, it's just a colon. Weird.
It's unnatural,
Barak was muttering to Silk.
That's what bothers me so much. Not only that, it's a breach of etiquette. If we ever get into a serious fight, it's going to be terribly embarrassing to have him giggling and carrying on like that. What will people think?
You're making too much of it, Barak, Silk told him. Actually, I think it's rather refreshing.
You think it's what?
Refreshing. An errand with a sense of humor is a novelty, after all. Sort of like a talking dog.
Rude. Oh, it's a face. Huh. For me, it didn't show up that way. I think you can... Yeah, even on the screen right here. This is how it looks for me. It's just like that.
Barak shook his head in disgust.
There's absolutely no point in ever trying to discuss anything seriously with you, Silk. Do you know that? This compulsion of yours to make clever remarks turns everything into a joke.
We all have our little shortcomings, Silk admitted blandly.
And that's the end of chapter 13. So I think I had kind of spoiled that one before. I had forgotten that it hadn't happened yet. Mandralin laughing. It is an interesting character development, though. He went from... He wasn't humorless before. Some nice bits of the old banter. I wouldn't say Mandralin was humorless. Like, he had good moods. But yes, I don't think that he's ever been described as laughing. And, yeah, Dernick's suggestion to laugh at his fear, and now he actually literally just laughs out loud in battle, is, I think, an interesting bit of character development. Oh, yeah, that's true. I have had that. Ha ha ha, I'm so afraid. Well, no, he's laughing to stop himself from being afraid, I guess. It is interesting, though, in that it does imply that he is battling his fear. Whereas before, he was just never afraid at all. So far, the only time we've got examples of it is fighting monsters, right? Or his fear of being afraid, yeah, I guess there is that. Maybe it's preemptive. Well, it is almost 9 o'clock. I don't see anyone on my list of followed channels streaming right now. Sharky once got through a really challenging, frightening situation by singing a Weird Al song in your head on repeat. So maybe it's not so weird after all. That's interesting. Which song? Which song did you sing? One of the people... Everything you know is wrong. Nice. One of the people that I used to learn fencing from occasionally suggested fighting to the tempo of a song in your head. As a way to sort of, I don't know, keep yourself moving, I guess. And then I kind of, I asked, well, what if your opponent catches on to the tempo? And he said, switch songs. It's like, all right, yep, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I suppose so. Alright, well, I am getting a little sleepy, which is good. I'm trying to get to sleep a little earlier right now. So, I'm going to wrap things up. I had fun with this, and hey, we had someone new in the chat. That's always nice. someone new following the stream, and said something about hosting the channel, which is cool. But yeah, I will be back next Wednesday, assuming nothing comes up between now and then. And I'll try and think about doing something to celebrate the 1 year anniversary, but yeah, if anyone's got any suggestions, let me know. But until then, hope everyone has a great weekend. We've got another open house tomorrow, and then probably going out to Chilliwack on Sunday to visit my mom. But yeah, right, wish us luck. Have a good evening and have a good weekend, and see you next Wednesday. Bye. Good night, everybody.